Hey guys, so in this video I'm just going to show you why it's beneficial to record a DI track along with a amp track when you're dealing with high gain guitars particularly, and how you can go about editing the amp track by using the DI track to do so. So I've got this song here. I'm working in Logic Pro X, but obviously a number of the topics we're going to be talking about here are very much applicable to other DAWs. So we'll just have a quick listen just so you can hear what kind of guitars it is we're dealing with here. Okay, so not the highest gain guitars in the world, but at the same time, what you can see if we look at the actual waveform is the fact that on the amp track, which we've got here, it's kind of difficult to pick out transient information, which is what we need to establish where we want our edit points to be to make sure it's completely in time. And that's where the DI track comes in. So on the DI track, you can see quite cleanly where there is areas of transient information which you can use to identify where you want your time edits to be. And Logic Pro can do this too by using flex time, and it can kind of do a lot of it for you, which is what we're going to look at today. So we've got our left side of the guitars here, but I want this to be double track, so I want right guitars as well. So I'm just going to create two tracks. And by the way, if you're wondering how you can record a DI and amp track simultaneously, I'll probably do a separate video explaining that. My situation in particular is that I'm using a Kemper profiling amp and using the SPDIF output with which to do that. So I can simultaneously record DI and main output at the same time. Like I say, you want to create your two tracks, so you've got one being your DI track and the other being the recorded amp track on their respective inputs. So I'm just going to record those guitars now. So now we've got some nice dual track guitars. So we've got our left side and we've got our right side, which are unedited. I have actually already edited the left side with flex time. So we're going to see what I've already done to these guys. But we need to do the same thing for the right. And we're just going to listen just to obviously hear the difference between left and right and figure out what it is we need to actually edit. I'm going to mute the DI signal on the right hand side like I've done with the left, because we don't want to hear the DI in with the actual amp track, and we're just going to give this a listen. Okay, so not the most awful performance in the world, but there's definitely some stuff in there that we need to tighten up. So what we're going to do is we're going to enable, well, first of all, we're actually going to group these guys together. So whenever we edit something on this one, it's going to carry over to this one and do the same thing. So the way to do that is you'll get your mixer up, find the two guitars you'll want to stick together in a group. You can see I've already done this with the left side of the guitars. So I'm just going to do the same thing in a new group, and I'm going to call this GTR2. And this menu that pops up here is actually super important. So you want to make sure that you select a few things here. So you want to go editing, that little tick box, make sure that is turned on, because that's basically going to establish, it's going to tell the tracks in the group to edit in the same way as one another. And you'll want to do this quantize locked audio tick box there as well. We can untick some of these. Like, I don't really care about the volumes moving together with these two tracks. And I definitely don't want both of them to be muted if I only want to mute one. So I'm going to untick that. I can tick pan, tick record. I probably should have done this before actually, but I'm doing it now and it doesn't really matter. So we've got that group set up. And now we've got the group, we can edit them together. So there's a couple of ways you can get into Logic's flex time. I find the quickest way to do it is you can either click this guy up here, or Command F is the keyboard shortcut. Okay, so now we've got our flex menus up, we can see that it's already been applied to this top track here, because as I say, I went in and I've already done this one. And we're going to do the same thing to these guys down here. So what we want to do is you want to enable both of these. And additionally, if you don't, you might already have this, but we want there to be this green Q to appear, the Q reference. Now, the way that you want this to be is that if you don't know how to, if that's not up for any reason, it's just Shift G to get that. But the way you want this is so that it's on the DI track of your group, but off on the amp track. Without going into too much detail, what this is, it's basically the reference that Logic's Quantize engine uses to apply quantize to everything else on a group based on a reference. And the reference we want is this DI track. We don't want the reference to be the amp track, because as we can see, Flex Audio has gone in and it's looked at this amp track and it's seen all this kind of false transient information, because it can't really work out where the transients are as effectively as it can on this DI track, which is why we want the DI track, because that's going to enable us to cleanly quantize this, where otherwise it would kind of fail on the amp recorded track because of the lack of transient information. So now we've got this set up the way we want. There's a couple of things we can do here. First of all, we can look at where on the quantized track everything's been lined up. So you can see this guy's all on the grid. You'll notice when I just clicked there, it opened up this kind of 3-pin editor cursor thing here. And what this is doing is wherever you see you've got these lines through the track, if you were to hover over it, it turns your cursor into this 3-pin thing. And what this is doing is it's basically saying you can select the one that you're hovering over, and I'm going to keep the 2 edit points either side in place, so you can stretch whatever it is that you've selected to be where you want it to be. This is super useful, and we'll see this in a second. You can see I've done this on a few things up here. They're basically just manual time adjustments, but for the most part, I've just let Logic's Quantize Audio do its thing. And that's what we're going to see now. So in order to quantize this, you'll get your track information up. You find your region that you want. And you can just quantize it from this menu here. And for this particular song, I know that divisions and the divisions that I played on the guitar are best done in 16th notes. But obviously, slower songs, typically 8th notes. If you're doing super technical riffing stuff, you'll usually be between like 32 and 16. But I'm going to go with 16 for this one. And you can see it's gone in here and it's adjusted this amp track based on what it's corrected on this DI track, because that's the reference. Now, we can see, even though it's quantized it, there's still some places where it's not exactly lined up with the track that's already been edited. Like I can see there's been a mistake here. So yeah, it's lined up this first transient where it needs to be, but this guy here is a 16th in front of where I want it to be. So I'm going to grab this guy and I'm going to move him back. And like we saw, what that's done is it's stretched out this one and it's condensed this edit point, and it's also applied that to the amp track below. So I'm just going to go through and make sure that everything's kind of lined up in the right way with the track above. It looks like this one, same sort of story there. So I'll just move that back. Yeah, let's just go through. It looks pretty good, to be honest. Oh, there we go, there's another one. For some reason, I'm always early on this phrase by a 16th. Oh, look at that. Terrible guitar playing there. Yeah, so the rest of it looks pretty good. So now we can listen to this and hopefully it's all going to be in time. So we'll just give this a listen. Much better. We're pretty happy with that. So if you want to get out of the flex menu, it's just the same shortcut again, just Command F, or you can click this guy. You'll notice you get this kind of drop down menu, which will always by default select whatever algorithm logic's gone, that makes most sense for this particular track. Now, where we've got a guitar, which is a polyphonic instrument, it's decided polyphonic is the way to go. If you're doing this with drums, which you can also do, it's a fantastic way to edit drums, which obviously you have multiple instruments occurring at the same time. It might select the slicing algorithm or the rhythmic algorithm, but generally with things like guitar, where it's a polyphonic instrument, polyphonic is the way to go. Something else to mention, you'll see on the information section here, sometimes by default, Logic won't do this, but you'll need to make sure to have this complex algorithm turned on. It's more resource intensive, but it definitely helps preserve the effect of being time stretched transparently, because what can sometimes happen when you're dealing with time stretching is it creates all sort of horrible audio artifacts, and what the complex algorithm does is it actually helps to negate that, so you don't get that horrible artifacty sound that you can sometimes get with time stretching. Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of how you actually go about editing using a DI to effectively key an amp track and get a good edit result out of it. Now, where you've got your DIs, it's obviously generally advantageous to have DI tracks anyway, not just to edit, because you can go in and you can obviously do things like reamp this now. You can also apply, obviously, amp simulator software to this. You can bolster your existing guitar tones, or you can forget about your amp tones entirely and just use guitar sims. Cool, so I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you've got any feedback, any comments, feel free to leave a comment on the video. If there's anything in particular you'd like to see me do in the future, please let me know. If you like what you saw, please click the like button. I'll probably be doing more, so if you want to hit subscribe, I'd very much appreciate that. So enjoy tracking guitars, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!